Hello again, and greetings from the vicarage. As you know, we held our first service in church on this last Sunday. It was lovely to be back in the building after being away for so many weeks. We had 30 members of the congregation spread around the church, with only members from the same household sitting together. The service, of course, was a little quieter than usual, with no hymn singing, but we were able to listen to the organ before and after the service, as well as while we received Holy Communion. This Sunday, it is the turn of the original 8 a.m. Book of Common Prayer congregation to come to our service in church. There was not quite so many updates this week. Most of the documents, of which there are now 23, have had slight alterations, which means there are up-to-date versions which I print, read and then keep for reference. My folder now has 98 pages. The main topic, which directly affects us, is a confirmation that face coverings have to be worn in church at all times. There is also a new version of the NHS Test and Trace data. It was offering guidance on how to collect that data. But because we are inviting each of you to a service, we know who is present. And as we are all part of the same church family, we already have your contact details, should they ever be needed. Today is the 10th Sunday after Trinity, which means we are about to get to the halfway point of the period of ordinary time. Our first passage continues in the book of Genesis, chapter 45, verses 1 to 15. We have moved on a few years from last week, and now we find Joseph revealing his true identity to his brothers. If you remember, Joseph was taken to Egypt and sold as a slave to Potiphar, the palace guard, who eventually made him his business manager. Joseph was then put into prison because Potiphar's wife accused him of rape, but he flourished in prison and showed his ability to interpret dreams. Of course, the most important dream was the 7 years of drought, which allowed him and the rest of the government to organise and stockpile the grain so that it could be rationed. Having saved Egypt from starvation, Pharaoh made Joseph second in command to the whole country and gave him a wife, a daughter of a priest. Joseph's brothers were sent to buy grain, and they came in front of him without even recognising him. He gave them the runaround, accusing them of being spies, putting them in prison, along with a few other cruel and unhelpful actions. We draw on the story from today's passage, where Joseph can't keep up the pretense any longer, and finally makes himself known to his brothers. The emotion is far too much, and Joseph weeps. After all this time, he is finally back with his own brothers. Although Joseph's brothers wanted to get rid of him, God used their evil actions to fulfill his ultimate plan. He used Joseph to save Egypt and to prepare for the beginning of the nation of Israel. Joseph said to his brothers, "God turned into good what you meant for evil, and you brought me to this position so I could save the lives of many people." Having spoken again to his brothers, he is reduced to tears yet again. And in our next passage, we read how Jesus is also reduced to tears. The Gospel reading is taken from the book of Common Prayers Lectionary and is from Luke's Gospel, chapter 19, verses 41 to 47. Jesus was travelling towards Jerusalem when he walked down the western slope of the Mount of Olives. After halfway down, he stopped and looked over towards the city. The great temple, made of white marble, gold facing, bronze door, and colonnaded porticos, would have dominated his view. Jesus, knowing that this magnificent temple would soon be destroyed, and knowing how the Jewish leaders had rejected their king, and also knowing that he and his followers, what they faced in the coming days, was moved to tears. Today, on the site where Jesus wept, there is a beautiful modern church known as Dominus Flevit. Dominus Flevit is Latin and it means the Lord wept. It is built in stone in the shape of a teardrop, with tear foils on each corner of its dome. It's one of my favourite churches in that area, and what I really found moving is a panoramic view out of the window above the altar. It allowed me to imagine what Christ looked at all those years ago. Being one of my favourites, I took lots of photos on both times that I visited, and I've included a few of them for you to see. In the picture of the inside of the church, you will notice the golden dome. This is the Dome of the Rock, which would have been at the temple that Jesus knew stood on his day. It's hard to imagine Jesus being reduced to tears, but we have to remember that whilst he was fully divine, he was also fully human. It's also reassuring for us to remember that whatever we are currently going through, or whatever concerns we have, Jesus has already experienced them, and he is there for us. At the end of today's Gospel passage is the story of Jesus clearing the temple again. He was removing the people who were using the temple for their own purposes and their own gains, and that includes the high priests. Many of these peoples wanted to get rid of Jesus because he was ruining their businesses and he was teaching all about injustice. Much of his preaching also favoured the poor over the rich. When we reflect on Jesus' words and his acts of judgment, we must also remember his tears. Jesus' tears are at the heart of the Christian gospel. As we remember with awe how Luke tells us that Jesus was representing the long-awaited God, those tears are not just a human reaction to a very sad situation. They are the tears of the God of love. Amen.